following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
This morning, I am pleased to welcome back an old friend of ABNY, American Federation of Teachers President Randi Weingarten. You can give an applause to that if you want. Since its inception in the early 1970s, ABNY, one of its core focuses has been on education, and throughout the years, we have worked with Randi and her team on so many initiatives, and we're honored that Randi is here this morning representing and discussing education. Randi was elected the president of the American Federation of Teachers in July of 2008. And it represents over 1.5 million members. The AFT represents teachers and school-related personnel, higher education faculty and staff, nurses and other healthcare professionals, local, state, and federal employees, and early childhood educators. In the months immediately following her election, Randi launched major efforts to place education reform and innovation high on the nation's agenda. And in September of 2008, Randi led the development of the AFT Innovation Fund, a groundbreaking initiative to support sustainable, innovative, and collaborative reform projects developed by the members and their local unions to strengthen our public schools. Randi served for 12 years as the president of the UFT, and for 10 years, Randi's chaired the city's Municipal Labor Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to welcome back Randi Weingarten, where she will discuss the Common Core state standards around the country and the opportunities and challenges for implementing these standards in New York State. Ladies and gentlemen, Randi Weingarten.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, that is not, I heard Michael Mulgrew, but that is not an education good morning. That may be a good morning in Washington, but that is not a New York good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. That's a New York good morning. So our obligation as a nation, and my obligation as an educator, is to help children achieve their potential, participate in our democracy, and propel our economy forward. In today's world, that means our students must be prepared to compete, not on the basis of their test-taking skills, but on their ability to solve problems, analyze and apply knowledge, and work with others. So, what if I told you that there is a way to transform the very DNA of teaching and learning, to move away from rote memorization and endless test prep, and toward problem-solving, critical thinking, and teamwork? Things I know that many of you have been advocating for years. And what if I told you that there's a way to do that, not a generation from now, but for students today, who will be the employees that many of you will hire tomorrow? No jokes about Mitt Romney when I put up a binder. In this binder, these have the potential to do that. These are the Common Core. It's also really good for sit-ups and for muscle pulls. These are the Common Core state standards for math and English language arts that have been adopted in the District of Columbia and 45 other states, including New York. The pages within these binders lay out the kind of learning that I've seen in classrooms in Finland, in Singapore, and other top-performing systems throughout the world. These standards establish high expectations for all students. Let me underline all students, whether they're in Bed-Stuy or Beverly Hills, whether they're in Bayshore, Long Island, or Birmingham, Alabama. And before I get to the importance of the binders, let me do a 1-minute advertorial for the AFT. Not in the New York Times today, but here. We've proposed a way for all prospective teachers to get ample experience in real classrooms alongside practicing teachers and to meet a high entry standard, like in law or medicine. We've created a system to make teacher evaluations constructive exercises that provide for continuous feedback and improvement and fairly identify those who are not cut out for our profession. A system that recasts tenure not as a guaranteed job for life, but rather a guarantee of fairness. We've confronted the devastating effects of poverty by advocating for and establishing community schools to meet the social, emotional health needs of children. We're fighting for public schools that are safe and collaborative and welcoming environments, and for the resources that kids need so that budget cuts don't cause lifelong harm. We've done all of these things because our goal, the AFT and our affiliates, many of whose presidents are sitting here in this room today, our goal is to make sure every child can get a great public education. And that's where the Common Core standards come in. I predict these standards will result in one of two outcomes. They will either lead to a revolution in teaching and learning, or they will end up in the overflowing dustbin of abandoned reforms, with people throwing up their hands and decrying that public schools just don't work. You can see the headline in the New York Post already, right? And the coming months will determine which outcome comes to pass. And there is reason for both optimism and pessimism. What has me optimistic is that teachers want these standards to succeed. We recently polled our members, and 75% of teachers support the Common Core. That's no surprise, because teachers, including many AFT teachers, played a fundamental role in the design and the review of these standards. We're talking about less memorization, less racing through a course of study, and more searching for evidence and conceptual understandings, all of which help students to be college and career ready. I recently visited a public school on the Lower East Side that's making this transition, the Nest plus M School, and I think the principal of Nest and our chapter leader is here in the room. There they are. I saw fourth graders learning about Columbus's New World expeditions in a manner aligned to the Common Core. It was remarkable. There was none of this. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, that many of us may remember. These students were reading passages from Columbus's diary, describing his experiences in his own words. They delved deeply into multiple perspectives, including making inferences from works of art from the vantage point of both Native Americans and the European explorers of their time. These are fourth graders. In the movies, this type of dramatic change could take place in the space of one inspirational montage set to a song, but not in real life. Teachers at Nest told me it took them roughly 50 hours last summer to review and understand the standards, to work through how they shifted their approach to teaching and learning, and to develop the lessons aligned to them. They're still at work, meeting weekly to discuss what's working and what isn't, as they use these standards in their classrooms. And they're getting a lot of help from faculty at Hunter College, corporate partners from Sony, and others. It's fantastic that those teachers have the opportunity to approach the standards that way, and that their students are already benefiting. But it's deeply troubling to realize that what's happening at Nest is by far the exception, not the rule. And that's what has me pessimistic. These standards, which hold such potential to create deeper learning, are instead creating a serious backlash as officials seek to make them count before we make them work. That's what we're seeing here in New York, as you've witnessed in the last few weeks, and it's happening throughout the country. In an editorial pointing out how far from ready their state is to transition to the new standards, the LA Times printed a tweet from a teacher that said it perfectly. Within a couple of years, and I quote, "We're starting testing on standards we're not teaching with a curriculum we don't have on computers that don't exist," end quote. That teacher speaks for many teachers throughout our country who have not yet been trained or prepared to teach in the manner envisioned by the Common Core. In that same poll in which 75% of teachers supported the Common Core, a similarly overwhelming majority said they haven't had enough time to understand the standards, put them into practice, and share strategies with their colleagues. And the writers of the standards have voiced the same concern. I'm delighted that David Coleman is here, one of the writers. But William McCallum of the University of Arizona, who co-wrote the Common Core math standards, says, and I quote, "Implementation is everything. Preparation of teachers is crucial. But what McCallum deems as crucial is being treated as optional in too many systems and by too many policymakers, including the federal government, which is spending $350 million on the new high-stakes tests aligned to the Common Core, but nothing specifically targeted to prepare teachers." There is a logical and effective way to turn these standards into classroom practice and student success. First, educators need to unpack the standards. That's the education word for it, which really means we have to fully understand what they are. Then, as UFT President Mike Mulgrew has repeatedly said, we need a curriculum, which New York City said won't be in place until this coming September. Then teachers need time and support to adopt their teaching, and they need to try it out in classrooms with their kids, both of which we saw at NEST. Then you see through a bunch of different measures if it's working. That's what assessment and accountability are supposed to be. You see if the whole shebang works before you say it's ready for prime time. But that's not what's happening. Instead, in New York State, the assessment has been fast-tracked before the other pieces were put into place. And the result is this destructive anxiety the kids and teachers have endured for these past few months. Throughout New York, students in grades 3 through 8 just took math and English tests on material they may never have seen. And the New York City Department of Ed's recent announcement of a K-8 curriculum is welcome, but announcing a curriculum 1 month before assessments, it begs the question, is this about deep learning or is it about desperate cramming? And it looks like they're repeating the same mistakes for high school students. A year from now, the Regents exam will be aligned to the Common Core, and there's still very little instructional material available at the high school level. With the tests that students here in New York have just taken, scores will drop. Not because there is less learning, but because the tests are evaluating skills and content these students have yet to be taught. And while you can argue that the drop will just reset the baseline, that doesn't seem to be the case. Across the state, scores from this spring's assessments may be used to determine whether students advance or held back, to designate school performance, and even to determine whether schools stay open or shut down. And they will be used as 20% of teacher evaluations. We, the AFT, has tried to fill the breach, as have others. For example, we've built a powerful online tool to provide educators with resources aligned to the Common Core. With Test Connect, our British partner, the AFT created Share My Lesson, a web-based resource for teachers to share materials with each other. I compare it to a digital filing cabinet full of materials, lesson plans, and ideas. Some teachers have told us that Share My Lesson is their only source for resources to teach to the Common Core. The AFT has already trained hundreds of teachers in Common Core aligned math and reading courses so they can support thousands of others. The AFT Innovation Fund provides grants and expert assistance for local union-led efforts and local union-led reforms, and has made significant investments in Common Core implementation across the country. Take the teachers at the Edwards Middle School in Boston, who with the help of the Innovation Fund are spearheading the creation of Common Core aligned lessons. And in the 3 months they've been on Share My Lesson, these hugely popular resources have been downloaded more than 28,000 times. By the way, our members' dues support each of these efforts. We are walking the walk. Time and again, we've made a choice not simply to call out what doesn't work. You've heard me do that a lot, but to demonstrate what does. This is the solution-driven unionism we are proud to practice. But it's not enough for the AFT and our members to walk the walk. Others must walk with us. So I cannot say this more simply. We are committed to the success of our students. That means getting this transition to Common Core standards right. That's why today I am calling for a moratorium on the stakes associated with the Common Core assessments. Hear me out. I'm proposing that states and districts work with educators to develop clear tasks and a clear timeline to put in place these crucial elements of Common Core and of Common Core implementation. And until then, the test should be decoupled from decisions that could unfairly hurt students, schools, and teachers. When scores drop as sharply as they're expected to, it will send an inexcusable message to parents. Your child is far from meeting standards, and she needs to meet these standards to get into college. But we don't have a plan, and nobody's accountable for getting her there except for the teacher who hasn't been trained. And you can just imagine how that teacher feels to see what's happening right now. New York Ed Commissioner John King made the right choice to not do double tests, the tests about the old standards and the tests about the new standards. Lots of people are making that choice all across the country to double up with tests. But the solution isn't double tests or a single test that nobody is prepared for. It's for everyone at every level, state, district, school, to support the work of teaching to the Common Core. When states and districts get the alignment right, moving from standards to curriculum to classrooms to feedback and improvement, student success will follow. But until then, a moratorium on stakes is the only sensible choice. Now, I said it about 2 minutes ago, so already I am sure somebody is tweeting, Weingarten is against accountability. Dead wrong. We're not avoiding accountability. We're trying to make accountability real. Let me be clear about what the moratorium is and isn't. We're not saying that students shouldn't be assessed. We're not saying that teachers shouldn't be evaluated. We're not saying that there shouldn't be standardized tests. We're talking about a moratorium on consequences for these transitional years. And it's kind of amazing that it's necessary to call on states and districts to implement the Common Core before making the new assessments count. But that's what I feel compelled to do today. So to anyone who's listening, and I'll say this across the country, districts, states, policymakers, administer student assessments, perform teacher evaluations, but use them to understand and respond to student and teacher needs in this transition. Just like business lets data improve products, let the data inform instruction and improve policy. That way, we can help teachers and students master this new approach to teaching and learning and not waste time punishing people for not doing something they haven't yet been trained or equipped to do. This moratorium, this transition period before high stakes are attached, it can't be a period of inactivity. And that's what I'm sure some of the business folks are thinking. This has to be boot camp. It must be a time of intense activity in order to properly implement the standards. So in this time period, we're calling for states and districts to put in place two things: a quality implementation plan and field testing. An implementation plan must include curriculum, professional development, and time. But they alone are not sufficient. A quality implementation plan also means involving frontline educators who are responsible for engaging students in critical thinking, problem-solving, teamwork, and the other skills expected in the Common Core and I saw at work at Nest. The plan can't just be imposed from on high. It needs to be designed with and by teachers, ideally through their collective bargaining agent. Because the only way it will succeed is if teachers have input and ownership. Teachers rise to the occasion. The more input and supports they have, the more confident they are about mastering these significant instructional shifts. Parents must also be a part of this. Schools and districts have to keep them informed and engaged. And the transition requires dollars. A recent study from the Fordham Institute estimated that the cost of implementation could run as high as $12 million nationally. $12 billion nationally. You're saying 12 million, it's not a lot of money. $12 billion nationally. And let's be real, if funds can be repurposed, great. But remember, schools and districts, and students in particular, have already endured 4 years of deep cuts. And this year, not in New York, but funding has dropped yet again in more than half the states. And while the sequester may no longer be causing headaches at airports, it's taking a hatchet to education funding for poor children. So, implementation plans must lay out what's needed, spell out how to get there, and make it clear how they will be supported financially and otherwise by teachers, political leaders, administrators, parents, and the community. Let's talk about field testing before I close. We need to ensure that the standards, the curriculum, the teaching, and the testing are actually aligned. I feel a little stupid for having to say that, but we need to do that. Timelines will vary, but we're calling for at least a year, a school year, the ups and downs of a school year, to field test a sound implementation plan. Field testing is important anytime a new process or product is introduced. Just ask successful businesses. For the Common Core, it would serve as a time when teachers can give and get feedback, share ideas, try out methods of teaching to the new standards in their classrooms every single day. So, if businesses field test new products as a matter of course, why in education would we do something less, especially with something as revolutionary as the Common Core? Once those two parts, a quality implementation plan and field testing, are completed, then it makes sense to attach consequences, to attach stakes to the assessments. But even then, can we stop this out-of-control fixation on testing, test prep, and paperwork? There's still time to give teachers and students the tools and the time they need so that students can meet the new challenges and the higher expectations with confidence. New Yorkers should insist on this, as should those in every state that has adopted these standards. And there are places that are trying to get this right. States like Kentucky Other cities like Cleveland are really trying. In Cleveland, back in 2010, the education community came together. They jointly developed a rollout plan for the Common Core. Their plan called for a 3-year period to build an infrastructure for the Common Core so that they could implement it fully in the 4th year. It included not just a commitment, but concrete steps to develop curricula, carve out time for school-based professional development and peer support. And even in their tough economic climate, they found funds to make it happen. My friends, the Common Core has the potential to be a once-in-a-generation revolution in education, and Cleveland's implementation plan reflects that. I'm not saying their approach is perfect for every state or district, but an approach that has time and resources and commitment behind it, an approach and a plan where everyone knows their part should be the standard, not the exception. When students complete only a small fraction of the tasks required of them, they get a failing grade. Yet when officials responsible for implementing the Common Core fail to do what's required of them, it's students, it's schools, it's teachers who pay the price. That's wrong. Everyone, and I mean everyone, who has responsibility for our children's education has to take responsibility for making sure the Common Core is supported, implemented, and evaluated correctly. That's what making accountability real means. So I come back to these. Revolution or dustbin? Revolution or dustbin? This is our chance. And if we fail to get this right, your mission of a better New York and our shared mission of a better America will be that much harder to achieve. If we are able to step on the accelerator of quality implementation and put the brake on the stakes, we can take advantage of this opportunity and guarantee that deeper and more rigorous standards will help lead to higher achievement for all of God's children. Thank you very much.